right. So this is Collection Management, Weeding and Inventory by Kayla Redcliffe and Alia Cron. So in this session, we are going to be going over first an overview of collection maintenance policies, what those tend to look like and what you're looking for in them. What is collection maintenance, the what and the why. How to do a collection analysis and what you'll be using it for when you do collection maintenance, when you're planning. Then we'll go into weeding, the what, why, and some useful reports for it. And we're going to be doing the same thing for inventory. So, generally speaking, when you're looking at collection maintenance, the first thing you want to go back to is your library's collection development policies. So, your collection development policy might be called that. They might be called selection policy, the collection maintenance policy, the acquisitions policy. You want to look through, your library will have one because they are legally mandated to have one. So you just have to kind of go through until you find it. So in very general terms, a policy decides what the rules are, what the goals are, what the rules are, and you are operating within those goals and rules. But you decide how and what you do. So your policy might say your collection is supposed to serve the entire community as its audience with the goal of providing educational and recreational material for them. But then after that, it's your job to figure out who makes up that community and what materials are educational and recreational for them. So those criteria come into play when you start actually selecting items. There'll be stuff like quality, currency, community interest, stuff like that. So your job as the maintainer of your collection is to figure out which items fit those criteria and overall which collections and which balance of collections fits the goals and rules that are laid out in your policy. So they do tend to give you a lot of room to work. They're not usually terribly specific, but it's very important to know what is in them and also what isn't in them. So a collection maintenance policy also says what criteria you are not going to use to make decisions around what goes into or out of your collection. So this is extremely important for intellectual freedom and for helping protect you from book challenges. So examples would include, an easy example would be the views or actions of an author. If we said yes to people asking us to remove everything by authors who have done terrible things, that removes a lot of fairly culturally important works from your collection. So it's important to take your role as sort of window to the world seriously. And that does mean you have to have the tools to defend your collection from challenges. And the policy is the place to do that because it has the backing of the board. So if you do not have these sort of criteria saying what you will not use to decide what goes into and out, and what happens if a patron wants an item removed, what do you actually do about it? Then we can help you with that. Let us know. It is important to have this around. We're seeing rises and challenges. All right, moving on to collection maintenance.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and give you a quick overview, and it's going to be a very quick overview, a little bit of a whirlwind of the philosophy of collection maintenance. We're working out our coordination for switching slides. It's very fun. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm just going to throw this little very handy sentence that I learned out. Collection management is all about making choices. Choices is that kind of key word there. To add or not to add, to retain or withdraw, and to preserve or not to preserve. That is what you get to focus on for the next little bit here. Next.
Sorry, it's being there. There we go.
Yeah, this has a lot of delays, we've learned, so bear with us. Sometimes things will skip.
We will absolutely send you guys the slide deck
Yeah. Okay. So collection maintenance broadly is critical, politically and emotionally charged, and more involved than development. It's critical due to issues of budget, space limitations, and item shelf conditions, which all can influence the aesthetics of the library, the usability of items, and the browsability of the shelves for your patrons and your staff that are trying to shelve things. It is politically and emotionally charged, as Alia will highlight a little bit later, because books elicit emotional responses. We were all raised to take care of books because their knowledge is important. And it is more involved than development, since weeding an inventory requires significant hands-on time. I'm clicking on things. Okay. The first major aspect of collection maintenance is withdrawal. Alia will cover weeding more in depth a little bit later on in this presentation, but quickly, withdrawal is based on a number of reasons, such as assuring the appeal, quality, appropriateness, and relevance of your collection. Assessing the collection's strengths and weaknesses will highlight areas where your collection is just not used, and then it'll allow you to improve on those areas. And finally, it allows you to make more effective use of space, resources, and staff to alleviate capacity issues. No one likes overfilled shelves, patrons or staff. It's overwhelming. And you can also bring in items that will circulate better than what you currently have on those shelves.
Sorry, just admitting something here. There.
Okay, we already hinted at space there, capacity issues. A note on space, as a concern within collection maintenance, it's limited and at a premium, but we all know this in public libraries and libraries in general. But it's important to remember that public libraries do not have the same responsibilities as archives, research libraries, or other cultural institutions that act as records for the province or serve long-term research needs. Public libraries are not archives. Space, staff, and resources can be better used on items that circulate frequently and fulfill the library's mission and plan of service. And then on the other hand, public libraries are in the unique position to offer library of things. These items will need to be stored, even though I'm saying don't really store too many things. These ones might have to be stored, and with a bit more security due to their potentially higher costs and breakable nature. I'm thinking of things like digital printers. Going to various libraries, they're encased and on display, taking up space, but those are things that can be used. Next slide, please. So just a note on space and library of things, if you were considering developing in this area, and I strongly suggest that you do, storage and display can entail additional costs, but you can also repurpose existing library furniture. Some items will require specialized casing, totes, and bags, while other items can be easily stored on repurposed carts, shelves, cabinets, or in binders. If you are storing things out of view, please make sure there are images that are digital or print, preferably digital, to increase browsability and your ability to promote that collection. Next. Finally, preservation is essential to maintaining your collection. Of importance to preservation is your item's useful life. Your goal is to prolong this as long as financially viable for its intrinsic value. As a result, preservation in public libraries entails various strategies such as replacement, reformatting. In this case, it would be offering ebooks, audiobooks rather than physical items. Binding and rebinding, using protective enclosures, which can range from MAC tacking to plexiglass enclosures for digital printers. There's quite the range there. Controlling the use of items, so things like local circulation or in-house use only, or any other activity that prevents the deterioration of items. Each item will require evaluation to select an appropriate preservation strategy. So things like a library of things, those items require a lot of pre-purchase research to ensure that replacement parts are available and to determine the cost of maintenance. Be mindful that the cost of preservation can sometimes be higher than the intrinsic useful life of an item. So always kind of be judging those budgetary concerns. You don't want to spend a ton of money preserving something that's not really worth very much, or that's not going to circulate. It does not have a useful life. It doesn't have a lot of intrinsic value in that case. High use items need to be withdrawn and also replaced. These also might be items that are good candidates for backpacking and rebinding, and that like additional effort and cost. And finally, items should be stored in appropriate casing, totes, and packaging to prolong their useful life. So you might have to buy a specialty case for, I'm trying to think of, I don't know, like a tool.
I mean, really, even DVDs or audiobooks.
Yeah, those as well. There's like, you have to do a little bit of research into how you're going to prolong the life of each one of your items, and every item is a little bit different. So there's thought that goes into these. Okay, let's pop into the next. And this is going to be, both of these presentations are a slight whirlwind. I'm just going to give you a heads up. We are covering a ton of content. Okay, so now that we have a little bit of an overview of just generally what collection maintenance entails, we're going to learn how to analyze the current state of your collection. Okay, so an ongoing analysis of your collection helps assess, like I've already mentioned, the strengths and weaknesses. So in order to make any decisions regarding maintenance, development, anything, you need to be able to evaluate the current state of your collection. This is where our collection overview report will be incredibly helpful. It's designed to be a one-stop, I feel like I'm selling it. It's designed to be a one-stop shop for all of your information you will need for collection maintenance, but also for development, which is going to pop up in the next presentation. You're going to get very familiar with it. It's basically a list of every item within your collection and detailed information about each of those items. I'll be breaking down what type of information this report contains further in the next presentation, but for now, this is the parameters. It looks a bit intimidating, but it gets a lot easier when you become used to running the report. And you can also save the report parameters so that you can just hit run whenever you want to run it. I would just talk to your consultant about scheduling this and getting it all set up. We might have to give you the permissions. Okay. This is just a quick, the filters that will be put on this report, they're very minimal. It's just selecting library and record status final, because we don't want to include deleted or provisional items. I just want to clarify really quickly, Alice B. Donahue is not selected here for any other reason than that it's the first option on this list, and then I took a screenshot. So this is not an indication that the rest of the data being used in this presentation is Alice B. Donahue's. I'm not going to tell you whose library it is. It was picked up at random just to give a really good spread so that we could talk to it. So next one, here's some data. So this I ran that whole report. I pulled the data and I put it into a pivot table. If you got a library visit from me this summer or even last summer, you're probably familiar with this already. I've inserted a pivot table into the data, and I'm going to just make note here and probably in another space that we're going to make the instructions and the how-tos to run every single one of these reports available to you. So don't worry about like aggressively copying anything down. But I've inserted this pivot table into the data, and one of the really, really useful reports that comes out of this is the circs versus total items, which you're looking at right now. It gives a sense of which collections are not only performing well, but also the ones that require weeding. And we're going to focus on the sections that are red for this presentation, which are the ones that require weeding. I usually will highlight things for my libraries so it's really apparent and eye-catching and kind of looks like Christmas. Looking at the fiction adult collection, for example, which is the one on the top, if your total items make up a greater percentage than that collection circ counts, it hints that a number of items in that collection are not circulating. This could be due to age of the collection, the general state of the collection, i.e. worn or grubby, or the items are hard to access because the shelves are overstuffed. You're gonna kind of have to visually get an assessment and look at the data at the same time to see what's kind of really going on. Or it could be due to the overall relevance of the collection and its items, just your community has no interest in those items. So another thing to be mindful of is that recent development can drag circ counts down. So the next slide, which don't go to it yet, yeah, we'll let you double check to make sure that isn't the case. But I just want to quickly look back at the fiction adults collection, because it's showing that the collection is hitting around the 5-year mark. I pulled this data in 2022, so last year. So it was about 5 years, which is pretty good. We want collections to average at around 5 years of age, depending on topics, but hard rule 5 years. Otherwise they start getting a bit outdated. So the lower circs on this collection might actually be more around issues of relevance. It's just not connecting with the community. There might be, obviously, because it's one of the top circulated sections here, there's also going to be a lot of potential grubby items that you're going to want to flag. The other one I want to look at is nonfiction, which is the next line. The low circ stats here might be more of an indication due to the fact that the average publication you're showing is 2012, which means it was 10 years old and wildly out of date when this data was pulled. So these two collections are showing that they're going to need to be weeded fairly heavily. Like, you already have a game plan there. You know you have to hit those two. And Ollie is going to cover some of like the really detailed reports that will help eliminate things like dead items with 0 circs, or ones that just haven't been circulated in 3 years. And by 0 circs, I mean like in their entire lifetime, they've never left the shelf. Grubby items, so things that have been circulated a lot and have just are showing wear and tear and aren't necessarily as appealing anymore. And then urgent items, which is specific to nonfiction. Those ones are kind of like your first, you hit those and get rid of them. Ollie is going to cover that. She's going to be much more brutal. Let's check out the next report. Okay, so this report is based off of the first available date. The first date that your items became available on your shelves. I'm pretty sure it happens when you when you get a book from us and you scan it in and then put it on your shelves, you get that date. So putting your items first available date into a pivot table gives you a good indication of the general age of your various collections and the years that they had the most significant development. So you can kind of see a trend going on. We'll dig into this more in the next presentation, because for development, it's important. If there is a large number of items in, let's say, 2009, then those items are going to be largely out of date. Just to note, Polaris was introduced in 2009. I'm basing this off of Olia's information. So those items actually may be older than what the data shows.
Legendary.
Yeah. So be aware of that. You might have some items that are just been sitting there for who knows how long. And collections with heavy development in the last year or two are going to show lower statistics, circ statistics, because those items have not had the time to build their circ counts. The reports that Ollie is going to go over account for this. So we don't want you to weed anything that's under 2 to 3 years in age, unless it's like severely damaged, because it just hasn't had time to build up those circ counts and actually gain traction in your community. Thank you. You read my mind. I was going to go click. Okay. This one's also really, really important. I've done a similar thing, but instead of the first available date, I put in the last checkout and renewal date. It really gives you a good indication on what's going on with your collection. So these numbers show how many items in your collection were last checked out or renewed by year. And I'm pretty sure you've all seen that date of it won't change unless it gets checked out again. So those are items that are just sitting there. So for example, there are 94 items showing in the nonfiction collection as last checked out in 2015. They've been sitting there for 7 years on that shelf, haven't moved. The fiction adult collection has almost 300 items that haven't been checked out in the last 20 years, if at all. So zero circs also show up here. So it's just something to be mindful of. We want things to move. So you're gonna want, when Alia goes through her reports, you can start learning how to get rid of these items and like build a little bit more strategies in addressing kind of like these items just aren't moving. There's this interesting relationship between storing things, but also not wanting to store things. You want things to be out in the community. So that's an indication.
To some degree, we store our items as libraries in other people's houses.
Yeah. You want to outsource the storage. Okay, so this next one is the exact same thing, but it's done on nonfiction. And what I've done, and I have the instructions in the how-to, like I've written up a huge how-to on how to break down everything to pivot tables and how to break down all of your Dewey codes so that you can really see what's going on in your nonfiction section. For this one in particular, 745 and 46, which is the decorative arts and crafts, show that there are more items in the collection that are circulating. These topics are showing an average age of 2004. Those craft styles are very out of date. No one wants them. Read that and update. The rest of the report actually shows mostly development, so we're not going to address it, but one quick thing to check also is like 610s, because they're health related. They'll show whether or not those areas are urgent. So I think these ones are showing at around 8 years old. It was 2015.
Yeah,
right?
I'm getting 2015, yeah.
Yeah, so again, from 22-ish is around 8 years old. Those are now potentially very urgent items, and Ollie's going to cover that report. You just eliminate it. Get rid of them. They could be harmful. Okay, next one. We're just going to go through. These ones are kind of a reiteration, but it's the same report. It's first available via Dewey code. So you can again see that spread on how your Dewey or your nonfiction collection has been developed based on topic. Which ones have had really significant development, and then which ones are going to be like really lagging behind on age, and you can very much see kind of where that average age is falling. And it helps you identify obviously holes, and then comparing this data with the checkout data, which you can swap to now, Alia, with the circs versus total, just allows you to make sure that the conclusions you're drawing from the data are as accurate as possible. And you can kind of learn new things the more you stare at this. Alia and I kept on finding things. We're like, oh, hey, there's another trend. So this is just a quick, like, things we pulled out while looking at it quickly. If you were sitting and poring over it for a while, you could probably see quite a bit. And then last one, this is actually showing that like a lot of them have been checked out in the last, let's say, 5 years, which is pretty great. We did see that this collection was a popular one, and it was one of the top circulating just in general. You can also start to see kind of where it tapered off, and it might have been just because of the age. But either way, these reports are really going to give you a good overview of the state of your current collection and just kind of like where you want to go next with that. And I'm going to say this in all of the presentations. These are reports you want to run regularly. You don't want to run it once and then just never do it again. You might even want to run it more than once a year, because if you're one of my libraries, I'm giving you a copy of this every year. You could run it every 6 months just to know what's going on. And particularly for development, this data is only alive for the extent of like until it changes again and then you're out of date. So if you want to keep track of any trends or developments, or if you're building towards a goal, you want to know every new kind of like iteration of that data. Okay. So I've mentioned that we're providing a bunch of write-ups on how to pull all of the overview report data, and then just like everything else, all of the other reports we're going to show you as oh, sorry, I'm getting a chat, and then also how to put in pivot tables. But if you want to learn more on how to use Excel and pivot tables, Alia has put together a really, really handy collection in LinkedIn on how to do that. So that's there. We'll make all of this available for you as well. You can click on it, go find the stuff, learn on LinkedIn. Okay. I'm going to hand this back
All
over
right.
to Alia.
Weeding, everybody's favorite thing. So before I start on the actual processes, I do want to address the fact that it can be really hard to throw out books. Like, we as a culture have a lot of feelings that books are sort of sacred, but a book is an object. It's not the object that's important, it's the information that it's containing. So the book itself is just a way to get to that information. And if the information itself isn't good anymore, it's like keeping food you'll never eat inside your fridge because you don't want to waste food. It's going to take up space, it's not going to get eaten, and eventually it's going to go moldy. So you see we have a chat. Ha! Kira says she loves weeding as long as it's not her own personal library. And actually, that is an important point, is that your collection is very much not a personal library. And so you have a little more freedom to be ruthless in some ways. Kayla talked a little bit earlier about the useful life of an item, and I think that's a super helpful way to look at this. If that container, if that object is past its useful life, it needs to go. Weeding the collection is a service you are providing to your community, just like free Wi-Fi or programs. So, why weed? You will notice that all of these are important reasons. A good collection is being weeded regularly for all of these different reasons. And each of these reasons why you weed also has a different way to target the items you need to get rid of because of it. So reliability, that's our outdated, our urgent report. Space, that's going to be honestly any kind of weeding, but you can get a little more ruthless with your non-checked out items if you need more space. Aesthetics, so this is not just damaged books, but it's also links back to space. Overcrowded shelves are not necessarily an invitation to linger in the library, and you guys are community hubs. You want to be inviting. And then finally, renewal. So all of those old, grubby, damaged books often are that way because they're popular. And so you want to make sure that you know which damaged items are popular, and then replace them. And that is all part of the weeding process. So, low circulation, outdated, grubby, and irrelevant is kind of our outlier here. That one's going to be mainly decided on sort of a wider kind of big picture analysis of Kayla's collection analysis. Is you can use that collection analysis to figure out if there are entire collections that are no longer of interest to the community. Usually, this tends to be a problem with your technology. Just mismatch between technology and the community, but not always. So, point of need weeding pretty much corresponds to the aesthetics and grubby categories. It actually still won't catch all the items in those categories. Only the items that actually circulate are going to get returned in order for you to see them and weed them. So that's okay. We have other reports and lists, and we have inventory for that. When you inventory, you will touch every book, so you will know if they are damaged or not. So I'm going to let you read this on your own. Unless you can't see it, in which case chat me, I guess, and I can read it through. But this is one of my all-time favorite library stories because it illustrates that children show their love through gnawing. This means that items that pop up as looking disgusting and in need of weeding are really likely to actually be super popular. Whether that's because it got gnawed on by kids, or often the other reason is it gets moved around a lot if it goes in holds. And as careful as they are, there's just more chances when it's in transit for it to get thrashed. So you need to have a system in place to address that. He saw, he loved, he ate. So this is another place where collection analysis kicks in. Because high circulation for a nonfiction item versus a fiction item versus a DVD aren't going to be the same number. So you want to know what a normal number looks like for each of your sections. And you also need to know what your threshold is for, okay, that's really popular and needs to be replaced. And again, that's going to be different for every section. The quick way to check for point of need weeding for an individual item in Polaris is to go to the properties tab menu thing in Polaris. And then there's a little statistics tab here. And you'll see we have year to date, previous year to date, and lifetime circulations. Fun fact, this little properties tab is where we get a lot of our information from Polaris that we pull in Simply Reports. So if, for example, this didn't circulate at all this year, but if 30 was a popular enough, big enough number, then I would want to add this to my ongoing replacement list. So, a few more best practices. You want to train everybody who's doing your check-ins, handling your items on materials assessment. So we have some really great materials assessment stuff in that handout. And I do highly recommend using it because consistency when you're assessing those materials is really important for good customer service. If you're inconsistent in assigning things damaged, then patrons get unhappy. So as you integrate those procedures or those weeding procedures into your general procedures, things will get easier. When you do that, you also in your system want to build in setting those items aside before they are checked, whether they are popular enough to be replaced or whether they can just be weeded. Set them aside physically so that people know they shouldn't go back on the shelf and start the cycle over again. And give them a different status like mending or unavailable, because otherwise, especially if they're popular and need replacement, they're going to end up on your holds list and it's going to be annoying because nobody will know where to find it. So systematic is the other type of weeding. And this is the one I'm going to be spending more time on because it's the kind that has the reports. So it is ongoing, but you want to have a schedule for it. And this is what's based on cold hard numbers. This is not based on a visual assessment. You're basing this on what you pull from Polaris. So plan on this being a daily or weekly ongoing task to get some out. It's best to have a schedule and have a tracker so that you know you're hitting all your collections in all the different weeding categories. And it's best to rely on numbers because even when you know your collection inside and out, we work in a consortium and some things are invisible from the front desk. Polaris knows all. Outdated nonfiction. Please, please, please be ruthless. Even if your outdated weed clears out an entire Dewey section, it is better to do that. Talk to Diane about getting some up-to-date replacements for that subject and let your patrons place holds on more up-to-date materials in the meantime. Outdated information is dangerous, can be dangerous for your patrons, and is definitely dangerous for your reputation. So here we have part of our schedule that is in your handout. And here's how to look at it. So weed after 5 years. That's your mark pub year when you're doing your report. And 610 is weed after 5 years. You'll notice 620 is actually weed after 10 years. So this 610 to 620 is your range in which you weed after 5 years. So your range for 5 years is 610 to say 619.999. Here's your report parameters. The blue bits are basically for your pull list. The colored bits are the ones specific to each list. Columns for sort. We'll sort the items into first all one shelf location if you use that, then into collections within that, then by call number, et cetera, et cetera. If you use this order, you will get something where you can just wander down your shelf and pull. So filters, this is where we put in the information that we found in the schedule here. So call number range, 610 to 619, and publication year. Everything on that list, everything is on that list is getting pulled except for the stuff current year -5. Grubby list. This list is how you catch items with high circulations that might need to be replaced. The more they're used, the more they get trashed. Only info you need other than the pull list here is your lifetime circ count. So your library patrons may be harder on their materials, they may be nicer. I do encourage you to play with this number, this lifetime circulation greater than or equal to. Figure out what number of circs equals, okay, this is trash, this might need changing. And that may very well be based on the collection. You can go through the collection here is flexible, but this is what helps you schedule and chunk your reading. So maybe I do nonfiction this time, maybe I do children's next time. Children's is probably going to need a lifetime circulation more like 20, because children show they love things by knowing them. This one, 0 lifetime circs, starts out with exactly the same information as Grubby, but we're targeting the opposite end of the spectrum. So note the relative date filters here. This is the grace period Kayla was talking about for new books, where you give them a chance to circulate so something doesn't hit your shelf on Monday with 0 circs and then go onto the waiting list on Tuesday. But this is the stuff that has never ever been touched. And finally, last checkout date. In-house and lifetime start counts are just so you can see if something maybe used to be popular. Note, again, first available date, just to keep you from weeding books that just hit the shelves. And then this 3 years, this is a flexible number. So you can change this number to 5 years if you think your list of stuff that hasn't been checked out for 3 years is too long. Withdrawing multiple items, I just wanted to give you a note that it is possible in Polaris to withdraw multiple items at the same time. You would hold down Shift, click the top one, click the bottom one, and then go to Tools and Manage Item Record. And you can change the circ status of all of them from here. However, if you make a mistake and withdraw items that shouldn't be withdrawn, we can't get them back for you. You would still have to have those items physically in your library to check back in physically. So if you're not sure and if you want to be cautious, put them in an item record and send us the item record to withdraw. All right, inventory.
Back to me. We're going to cover inventory, and I promise you it's not scary. I have heard about the PIM method, and don't worry. Pop to the next. While it's not scary, it is important, like extremely important, and I have to reiterate that. And do it regularly, preferably every single year. You could push it to 2 years, but I don't suggest doing that. I know it's a lot of work just kind of going through all of the items, but try and get this done on an annual basis. It is essential for keeping your collection up to date in Polaris. Over time, it's common for item circulation statistics to not match between Polaris and the reality of what's actually happening in your library with the physical items. It can create problems for circulation. So if you have items showing as missing or in processing in Polaris, they're not going to be put on hold, even if they're actually actively open for circulation and sitting on your shelves in reality. For statistics, those items are not going to get circ stats if they're not getting put on hold. Like they might get circ stats if a patron comes in and actually checks them out. But if patrons from throughout track are wanting to access those, or you have a patron who just likes to put things on, well, I am this library patron. I don't necessarily always like browsing, and so I'll just put things on hold and then go pick it up. Those holds are never going to happen on those items, so you're missing out on those circ stats. And then finally, it becomes a problem for your library's reputation within track, and inventories are the only way to ensure that your reputation stays good, because items sometimes, and this happens quite often, get withdrawn and discarded physically, but they still show in Polaris as in, and those items can build holds. And if you miss them in your pick list, that can just have a queue and then they never get filled. And everyone in the other systems are wondering what the heck is going on. And it just does not look good on you. Or if you constantly have items that are just missing and not getting filled in those holds, you want to reconcile the two things, Polaris and the reality of your items. Polaris can't like magically make that known. You have to ensure that those two things are the same. When we come and do cataloging profiles with you as well, if these things aren't reconciled, it gets harder for us to do a cataloging profile because things get very messy. Okay, next. So doing an inventory is super simple these days. We're just going to show you the how-to. You no longer have to do that old PIMS method, which I heard was a pain in the butt. I've only ever heard about it. I've never, I mean, I kind of know the basics, but you don't have to do anything related to that anymore. It's just simple scanning now. Nothing has to be scanned in a specific row. You can scan in any order and fashion you want to, as long as every single item gets scanned. All you do is open up a Leap, go to the check-in window, select inventory, and scan. You can delegate this to anyone. They just need to scan those items in. Super simple. You can get those cool, what are they, like wireless scanners? That,
Yeah, like the portable ones. They even have storage.
Oh, aren't necessarily the most reliable ones. But you can also put, you know, grab a laptop or an iPad and plug in a scanner and off you go. Pretty easy to do. Okay. Once you've done the whole inventory, you're going to run a report. And this is one of the few things that or tasks that you do where you run a report after the fact rather than before the fact. But once you've done your inventory, you pull this report in order to catch anything that was not inventoried. So this just has information so that you can find that item. And then the item last inventory, you don't need to include it. It's solely if you're curious to know when the last inventory was. My report allows you, the overview report allows you to like throw in those dates as well to get the beautiful graph that was shown for the first available date and the last checkout date. So you can see the SKU for your items if you're curious to see how badly they need to be inventoried. You're allowed to get that overview, but this is just to get those pull items. If you want to get to the next one, you're going to run it twice with just a slight little change in the filters. The first one's going to catch anything that's never been inventoried before. And so you fill in these little general filters and you go to the date filter and go to last inventory date. And there's a little box that says not present. And you check it off and it'll pull for things that have absolutely no date. You're going to go search for those items. If you can't find them, you're going to record them in Polaris as missing or withdrawn so that holds aren't placed on them. And then you're going to go with the exact same. You can leave everything the same and go back to the report parameters and just uncheck that little box. And then in the last inventory date, you're going to put a date really far in the past. And then another date closer to when you just did your inventory. You don't want it to catch the stuff that you just inventoried, but you want it to catch anything that in the past, you know, however many years, because something might have been inventoried 10 years ago, and it's not going to show up in that never been inventoried list. but you might have missed it. So you want to find those items as well. And then you're going to go and search for them again. You're going to mark them down in Polaris as missing and withdrawn if you can't find them. And then you're done your inventory. That's it. It seems kind of tedious, but it's not. We've covered quite a bit of ground now on collection maintenance specifically. Do you have any questions? We will be getting into development in the 10 minutes after this, but we have a little bit of time if you have questions, comments.
I think we have half an hour. I think the development starts at 3.
Oh,
Development starts at 3. It's 2:21.
okay.
You guys
We
have
all the
time.
Get up and move. Any fears about inventory or weeding? Things you're unsure about? Or was that pretty clear? I can see Kathy's no longer with us. Not to call anyone out, sorry. She's just the only one to get.
Kira has a question. She's on chat.
Yeah.
Shoot, Kira.
So she's asking,
Is there a timeline for cookbooks that particularly deal with diets?
Mhm.
Let me check, because we actually do have like a full list.
Yeah.
And
we're going to supply that to you because sometimes we can't even recall all of the specifics. So we're going to give you reference material. So
Yeah.
yes, I believe diets. I can't remember the range for the dates, but I think Ollie is looking that up right now.
Yeah, I am.
And Kira, like, we have ranges set, but if you have heard something for a particular diet, how it's perhaps evil, and driving people towards being unhealthy, then I would not worry about what the guidelines say in that case, because the guidelines are going to be general. Sorry, Alia, I'm taking over. I'm going to.
Oh no, you are correct.
Though. Yeah, if you're hearing like updates,
you guys should know. Joe's the one that wrote these guidelines, so listen to her. So let me see here. That's what, 640. So we have a couple other ones. Hang on. Yeah, okay. So cookbooks for special diets. And I would say that anything that is likely to change your health should reflect current medical information, so weed after 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you hear, I would say, or if you're watching the news and someone like the Mayo Clinic or some universities, like there's
like saturated fat is really bad for you, and you have like cook or diet books that are promoting like high fat, saturated fat diets, then maybe those are really great for your I know right now. So
Sandra asks, what about the inventory tab in the check-ins? So that's actually the same thing, I think, Sandra, in Polaris. That inventory tab in the check-ins is the same tab that Kayla had the screenshot of in Leap. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, if you can clarify that, that would be really handy. If it's just how to get there. And then Nicole answered, do you know when the old inventory method stopped being a thing? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. It was really hard for me to figure out the information around it. I hunted it down. I can't give you an actual date, but since
I would kind of assume, Nicole, that they will need some training. Are handheld scanners and scanning to Leap going to be new concepts for the staff?
They're really easy concepts to grasp. It's just opening that check-in and scanning things in as if you're checking it in. You just want to make sure you have the inventory open, and it's your staff already knows how to scan and check things in. So it's a very simple skill for them. If they think they have to do it ordered in a like specific order, just tell them not to worry about it at this point. It's called the PIMS method. I think it was the Polaris Inventory Manager that acronym stood for. You have to rent equipment. You used to have to rent the equipment from us. to do it, and we don't even have the equipment to do that. So we've transitioned to this new way.
I have this sneaking thought that there was at least some people still trying to do it during COVID. So I would assume that you'll be explaining a little bit. Somebody with the last name Scott, I am so sorry, I don't know your first name, asks if there's a preference for doing an inventory of the entire library over a few days or doing inventory of specific sections throughout the year. I would say personally, I prefer doing them specific sections throughout the year, but make sure you track them.
Yeah, so that you know what's going on. It makes it a lot more manageable, particularly if you're just one person. Like however you're gonna get it done in that year, do what works for you and your staff. There's no like we're not expecting you to get it all done in a day or two, and like shutting down the whole library. If that's what you need to do because it is just you, then that's what you need to do. But if you can spread it out over like a month or do it at different stages in the year, that's fine too. As long as it all gets hit in a year, every year, you can kind of build out a schedule for staffing and just how things play out for your, yearly schedule.
Yeah, like I would say if you keep track of what dates you do particular sections, that will probably help you with that post-inventory report for each section.
Those are really good questions. Any more? Oh, sorry, Sandra. Did we answer your question on how to get to the
Yes.
tab? Yeah, okay, good.
It was just that it's got I think it's the little icon on Polaris rather than actually saying what it is.
Yeah, in Leap, it's just your check-in window, wherever the options are for like in-house. If you use that, it's going to be related. There's in-house inventory, bulk, I think, and then
Special something. I don't know. They're all weird.
There's a couple options there. You just select inventory. Leap is a little bit more user-friendly in that it's just all up on the top. You click one. We have a preference for Leap, so you'll see a lot of Leap in here.